I believe that all culture must have arisen from cult. Originally, all of the facets of our culture, whether they be in the arts or the sciences, were the province of the shaman. The fact that in present times this magical power has degenerated to the level of cheap entertainment and manipulation is, I think, a tragedy. At the moment, the people who are using shamanism and magic to shape our culture are advertisers. Rather than trying to wake people up, their shamanism is used as an opiate to tranquilize people, to make people more manipulable. Their magic box of television, and by their magic words, their jingles, can cause everybody in the country to be thinking the same words and have the same banal thoughts all at exactly the same moment.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 But when it comes to 5G, AI, and COVID, I don't deal with a separated universe. Everything is connected with each other. And the one main notion that comes to my mind when dealing with this issue is the issue of mind control. That is the number one issue we need to focus on. What is mind control, and what are the different ways of being mind controlled? And when we get a grip on that, then we can really see the world from a different perspective. And they've ramped up the mind control techniques technologically when they introduced microwave radiation in the end of the 80s with 1G, I think, and 1992 with 2G. And that is what is also referred to in a document with the very appropriate title, A Silent Weapon for Quiet Wars. And there has been a war waging on the human mind ever since then.
So what happened in 1918? There was a huge, in every pandemic in the last 150 years, there was a quantum leap in the electrification of the Earth. In 1918, late fall of 1917, there was the introduction of radio waves around the world. Whenever you expose any biological system to a new electromagnetic field, you poison it, you kill some, and the rest go into a kind of suspended animation so that, interestingly, they live a little bit longer and sicker. And then starts in World War II with the next pandemic with the introduction of radar equipment all over the Earth, blanketing the entire Earth in radar fields. First time humans have ever been exposed to that. In 1968, there was the Hong Kong flu, and it was the first time the Earth has a protective layer in the Van Allen belt, which essentially integrates the cosmic fields from the sun and the Earth, from the moon and Jupiter, etc., integrates that and essentially distributes that to the living beings of the Earth. And we put satellites emitting radioactive frequencies in the Van Allen belt. Within 6 months, we had a new viral pandemic. Why viral? Because the people are poisoned, they excrete toxins, they look like viruses. People think it's a flu epidemic. In the 1918 epidemic, the Boston Health Department decided to investigate the contagiousness of this. So they, believe it or not, took hundreds of people with the flu and they sucked the snot out of their nose and injected it into the healthy people who didn't have the flu, and not one time could they make the next person sick. They did this over and over again, and they were not able to demonstrate contagion. They even did it with horses who apparently got the Spanish flu, and they put bags over their head, and the horses sneezed in the bag, and they put the bag over the next horse, and not one horse got sick. You can read about this in a book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who chronicles all the steps in the electrification of the Earth and how within 6 months there was a new flu pandemic all over the world. And when you hear the normal explanations, how did it go from Kansas to South Africa in 2 weeks? So the entire world got the symptoms at the same time, in spite of the fact that the mode of transportation was horseback and boats, and there's no explanation for it. They just say, we don't know how that happened. But when you think about it, with these radio waves and other frequencies that some of you have in your pocket and on your wrist, you can send a signal to Japan and it arrives instantaneously. So any of you who don't believe there is an electromagnetic field that communicates globally within seconds just is not paying attention to this. And I will only finish by pointing out that there has been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. And I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. It's called 5G, where they now have 20,000 radiation-emitting satellites, just like the radiation-emitting thing in your pocket and on your wrist and that you use all the time. That is not compatible with health. I'm sorry to say it, it's not compatible with health. That is a water destructuring device. And for any of you who say, yeah, well, we're not electrical beings, we're just physical matter, then don't bother doing an EKG or an EEG or a nerve conduction test, because we are electrical beings and the chemicals are only the byproduct of those electrical impulses. And I'll finish with, anybody want to make one guess as to where the first completely blanketed 5G city in the world was? Exactly. So when you start thinking about this, we are in an existential crisis here, folks, the likes of which humankind has never seen. And I don't want to go all Old Testament prophet on you, but this is something that is unprecedented. The putting of 100,000 satellites in the very blanket of the Earth. And by the way, as I was going to say earlier, this actually has something to do with the vaccine question, and this got brought home to me because about a year ago or so, I had a patient who came in who was totally fine, a surfer and all, and then he works as an electrician putting in Wi-Fi systems for very wealthy people. Electricians have a very high mortality rate, but he was fine. And then he breaks his arm and he gets a metal plate put in his arm. 3 months later, he couldn't get out of bed and was total, heart irregularities, just total collapse. The susceptibility has to do with how much metal you have in your body, as well as the quality of the water in your cells. So if you start injecting aluminum in people, they become receptors for absorbing increased electromagnetic fields, and that is a perfect storm for the kind of deterioration of the species, which is what we're now experiencing. And I'm just going to finish with one more thing, which I like too, is a quote from Rudolf Steiner. And by the way, this was around 1917, so there was a different time. In times when there were no electrical currents, when the air was not swarming with electrical influences, we're talking 1917, it was easier to be human. For this reason, in order to be human at all today, it is necessary to expend much stronger spiritual capacities than was necessary a century ago. So I'll just leave you with whatever you can do to increase your spiritual capacities, because it's really damn hard to be a human being these days.
We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks? And it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot.
Between ourselves and reality, as quickly as we possibly can, we erect a lie. We erect a false set of assumptions that are culture-bound. And this has always impressed me, the culture-bound nature of language, that in a way you can never leave the place you're raised in because you acquire a local language. And the local language is all you ever really have.
The moment a child is told what a bird is, if they believe what they're told, then they never see a bird again. They only see their thoughts.
By the time a child is 8 or 9 or 5 or 6, they have covered the entirety of reality with these interlocking little linguistic tiles. Language is like an informational creature of some sort. I mean, languages live, they reproduce themselves. Yes, it's a kind of virus. William Burroughs said this. He said English is a virus from outer space. I have no quarrel with this.
What it really is, to specify that, is mind control, social engineering. When you are not in use of your mind, someone else will use your mind. They assimilate us human beings into their way of thinking. They want us to perceive the world like they see the world. It's like the Borg in Star Wars. Resistance is futile, assimilation. And they want us to view ourselves as a virus, when we're anything but. We're beautiful, loving, creator beings that cannot transmit a virus, from the way I've looked at the whole thing. And they want to view the world like that. And through that worldview and social distancing and not interacting with humans, over time, this mindset is solidified and it becomes a habit. So people have now, that's why you never compromise with the first stage when something like this happens, because there's more coming down the pipe.
Radical fury that came like waves across the internet had the power to change the world.
The methods always stay the same. The technology changes. And it's only about repetition, repetition, repetition. And on the basic principles of conditioning by Ivan Pavlov, when we have that in mind, that's how they shape our perceptions of reality.
Jeg er på vej ud af byen sammen med en masse andre dejlige mennesker. Vi tager ud af byen ikke fordi vi ikke nyder livet i byen og den puls der er i byen og så videre, men vi tager simpelthen ud af byen, fordi vi mener at det er den bedste måde at møde den storm som er på vej.
Men uanset om du er sensitiv over for de her stråler eller ej, så prøv at flytte dig ud i naturen, hvor strålingsniveauet er langt mindre end i storbyerne.
So in the cities we are like deers caught in the headlight.
So that's the reason you need to get out of the big cities now.
Så til dig som bor i Aarhus eller København og som har en eller anden, ja, det kunne godt være det er nu jeg skulle tage ud af København, så vil jeg sige, det er i dag du skal gøre det.
Get out of the big cities, get out into nature.
Få din røv ud af byen, ud i naturen.
Det er mega vigtigt, fordi de her master, de står inde i byerne, og vi kender alle sammen. Vi har alle sammen venner, som bor inde i byerne. Og hvis du ser det her nu, så vil jeg bare bede dig om at tage ud af byerne. Og så det vil være i de her communities uden for byerne, at vi klarer os igennem den her krise.